Hey, and
Right.
so with that said, it's the top of the hour here. Let's kick things off, everyone. We'll have, I'm sure, many more folks joining in process. So, welcome. If we've not met, I'm Art Petty. It's great to be your host. The Leadership Caffeine Jam Sessions, literally my favorite professional development experience of the month. And of course, I hope that they're yours or they become yours as well. Today, I am thrilled and we are honored to have with us one of the leading executive coaches in the world and one of the foremost experts on the topic of executive presence, Joel Garfinkel. Joel, welcome.
Great to be with you, Art. I'm looking forward to talking to people about executive presence and really helping people understand the value of it in their
And
work.
by the way, Joel, you're so kind. I don't mind sharing. Joel and I have done three different events for three different audiences today. I bet he had to force himself a little bit just to say that. Great to be here with you, Art. It's like, oh no, not again. So.
I'm wondering what are we going to do for the fourth time together?
Yeah, I'll see you Monday morning. Hey, so if you're new to a jam session before, we don't have a lot of rules, right? You walk on the grass, please. The only thing we ask is engage respectfully. Use the chat. We want to light the chat up. Use the reply all for comments, for questions, for ideas, for resource suggestions, whatever you have. You are the heart of this program here, and we really appreciate that. Just as an FYI, in case anybody's concerned, I anonymize, the appropriate term, I anonymize the chat stream, and we do send that out along with the video link and the PDF of this mind map. So never fear, your name will not show up next to the chat comments. All right, so I love elephants. They're great at the zoo. I've not been on a safari. I'm sure they're amazing. I just don't want this elephant in the room here. And so, Joel, you make the appropriate point in your book, Executive Presence. You don't have to be an executive to work on it. It's not just for executives. So, can you comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes people get caught up in the word executive, and I say no. It's executive presence is a concept, and if you need to make it more accessible to you, then replace executive with leadership or professional. The whole concept, the most important word in it is presence.
Presence,
And so
yeah.
every single person inside an organization, I can ask them, how much is your full presence showing up in your work environment? And if it's not, what are you doing to make your presence felt? So that's really the core message of it.
Yeah, yeah, so well said. So, and by the way, henceforth, I'm going to use EP instead of executive presence because I get tired of typing it out. And by the way, how many times a day do you hear the word henceforth? It just doesn't show up very often, does it? So, all right. So, Joel, just checking this column here. How did you get involved? How'd you get interested in this topic? Yeah, I mean, you've been a successful executive coach for a long time, and you really developed a focal point for EP. How did that come about?
It's interesting. I had about 20 years ago, I had 10 different leaders, all within a short amount of time frame, come to me and want to work on executive presence. And because they said their career was being limited because they weren't getting opportunities, because they weren't really stepping into their power. They didn't have as much conviction. They were a little more just, they didn't show up in a way that felt like their presence was being felt in the organization. So they all came to me for this. I'm like, this is interesting. All 10 of these people, and they all had similar backgrounds and similar makeups, and they're a little more introverted, a little more humble, more deferential. And they're like, I need to feel more of my strength and power in the work environment. And so when all this happened, I'm like, something's going on here. Why is it I have 10 different leaders all having the same issue with a similar background? And so I started doing research on it, and that led to my book. It led to my focus and my practice. And I really dedicate in my career, what I'm dedicated to is helping people be less hidden as leaders so they're not being overlooked and underutilized. And so how can their presence be felt in the organization, and what can they do to put themselves out there more? And so that's what started it all for me. And ever since then, I ended up, like I say, wrote the book, and most of my clients are dedicated to improving their presence inside an organization. So that had a huge impact on me when I could really see how many leaders came through with a similar issue, and I really wanted to help them. And there wasn't necessarily anything out there in the marketplace that fit that need, and I was able to kind of provide that for them.
Just fascinating backstory on that. So I've got good news and bad news for the group. So hey, the good news is you get the benefit of Joel's wisdom and thousands of hours of practice and research, all condensed into under an hour. Maybe the bad news is, Joel, I've noticed through your services on your website that a true executive presence engagement is 6 months of hard work. Is that true?
Well, if we had a magic pill to give to you and you say overnight you had this huge presence and life changed dramatically and you were amazed how you showed up in your work environment, but it does take a commitment. A lot of the work I'm doing, it's one-on-one with leaders and spending 6 months with them and really helping them improve and develop with specific strategies and tools and concepts. And there's a bunch of different attributes they need to work on, and which I'll go over in a bit. But there's like 9 different attributes that we really hone in on, and because of that, there is a process that it takes time. And then you're talking about change behavior. And change behavior is not an overnight process. So
Sure.
to work one on one with someone and really be a sounding board, a mentor, a guide on a regular cadence really is something that helps make the change.
All right, great. So let's get the chat flowing here. And by the way, when you see this little image showing up here, this is your clue that I'm about to ask a question, and that's the cue for audience participation. So go crazy with the chat. Here's question number one. Think about the people that you perceive have a lot of EP. What is it about them that gives you that impression? What do you notice? And by the way, first comment in here, drop an email as well to me at art@artpetty.com, and I'll be happy to get you a book sent to you. You need to be in the continental US for that. Let's see what we're getting in here. So, Craig, clothes. I've never seen that come up so quickly in the process. So the dress, yeah, Joel, you
Craig, what are you wearing right now? That's what we want to know.
are you
Um,
displaying EP, Craig? Caring, confidence, yeah, being a centered, oh, Zachary, I'd like to unpack that one. Being a centered individual, strong presence, but fair, confidence in how they carry themselves, value driven. That one's so critical. Confidence in a network or someone that's really trying to build connections. Greg, I love that one. And since I know you sincere, you exemplify that. You really do. So love that topic. All right. So
Good.
Craig was our first one up. Craig, happy to get a book. If you're in the continental US, all you need to do is send me your shipping information, and I'll put it up here to art@artpetty.com. It was that easy to win a book. What else do we have here? Carefully chooses words and not really verbose. Ooh, you're kind of channeling what Joel is about to tell us. Yeah,
Yes.
Frank. I mean, the listener, and I talk about that all the time. If you want to do anything to improve the presence and the perspective of you as a leader, redouble your effort to be a great listener for sure. All right, that was fantastic. Let's go to the opposite side. And what is it about individuals that you perceive that do not have executive presence? What do you notice there?
And they
Those,
stand out in ways that aren't positive. What are some of the things that you see people do?
yeah, self-centered, rambling, scatterbrained. Zachary, quit talking about me. Uh, more,
Arrogant.
yeah, be late to everything. Ooh, yeah, indecisive. They're channeling the matrix, judging, judgmental. Yeah, that's a good one. Lack of confidence. And we go, the clothing thing, a bit disheveled in their appearance and their work. How do I spend most of my days until I'm ready to be on screen? Speak weakly, quietly, not boldly.
Yep.
These are great, Joel.
They're
These are
really good. Spot
fantastic.
on.
Yeah, no doubt about it. So, all right, nice job bringing those up. I am sliding over here. And Joel, I have to ask you. So we all have this kind of feel for what EP, when we see it, we recognize it. And when we see that someone doesn't have it, we recognize it. But we want to know, how important is this really? Is this just a good business cliche term and a way to write books and make money? Or how important is it to us? And I threw up your prompt there from one of the research studies you cite.
Yeah, so we talked about this, and that is, well, there was a study done where 400 CEOs were asked how they chose next level leaders, and 89% of them said they look for one critical trait, and that's executive presence. So the thing you have to realize with this is that if you want to advance in your organization, you want to become more successful, what you realize is that as you rise in the company, your executive presence must keep pace with your growth.
Mhm.
And here's a really important point. The higher the stakes, the more you need power and presence. So when you're interacting, when you're interacting with more senior leaders or more important, type of meetings, you want to show up with that power and presence, and also realize that leaders are paying attention. Who has executive presence or not? And those who do often are the ones who get promoted. Because as you can tell, if someone is lacking confidence, disheveled, speaking weakly and quietly, indecisive, you're not going to come across as a next level leader. So you got to recognize the importance of having a high degree of executive presence when you're interacting with senior executives. And that's an important thing to recognize. How am I showing up? And am I seen as a next level leader? Am I having the attributes that makes other people feel like that they can, you're able to win the confidence of others, meaning that others are consistently feeling like you demonstrate confidence in your decision making, in your actions, in your communications. And it's a signal to others that you can be relied upon, you can be trusted, because you're telegraphing that you can be in charge, that you're someone who knows how to take charge and be decisive and influential and even assertive at times. So it's that type of energy that really people are looking for.
So Joel, and we've chatted about it. One of the situations I run into fairly regularly, really good people approach me. Oftentimes they're kind of in maybe the middle of the organization or so. They have aspirations. They're doing good work and they're getting passed over. And it often comes down to this issue that they're lacking in some of these elements of EP.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I suspect you've encountered that quite a bit in your practice as well.
I have. What I often hear is the line I hear is, "Well, can't I just let my work speak for itself?"
Right.
And that's a really safe place for people, because if I let my work speak for myself, like, okay, good, that's enough. Like, I'm really competent. I'm really skilled. I'm a good professional. I get my work done. All valuable things, but it also becomes, you can't just rely on hope or chance to get promoted or to get visibility. You got to really look at it from your standpoint of, what am I doing to project the right presence? What am I doing to increase my visibility and make sure people know the influence and the impact I'm having on the company? Because when they know those things and they can feel those things and they can sense those things and they can see those things, then you and the representation of your brand becomes more well known for someone who knows how to get things done. Yeah, you're good at your job, but you're also effective, and people know your effectiveness is not being done more in a quiet, hidden, overlooked, underutilized way. And so some of this is about putting yourself out there much more, and making sure, and it's not just about self-promotion and bragging. No, it's about making sure people really are aware of your value that you bring to the organization. And that's being clearly communicated in the work you do, or when you speak up at meetings, or the projects you're running.
So that really ties nicely into the text I have on screen there. So I kind of call these executive presence, or EP, and career facts of life. Every organization, there's someone or some few someones that decide what gets done and who does what. And guess what? They're talking about you, or worse yet, they're not talking about you. I think those facts of life are reality, and they really underscore Joel's perspective. And the other is, and I take this from my colleague Adam Bryant, great management thinker. He talks about the sticky note concept. The fact is that we all have these invisible sticky notes on us, and they say something like, "Hey, art is great at, but dot dot dot." And it's the buts that get us. And Joel, I know you talk about that in your content as well. We have to know what the buts are on us, and that's a really bad turn of words, isn't it?
It is, but you're absolutely, you're correct, because let me give you some examples and see if people in the audience can relate to this. You're in a talent review meeting, they're all discussing you, you're not there, you're not present, and you love to know what they were saying about you. But let's say some of the conversations, the buts are technically competent, but doesn't take command of a situation. Now, the second half after the but are examples of executive presence. Let's say you're excellent with customers and clients, but you don't communicate clearly and succinctly with top leaders. Or you're highly intelligent, but you're rigid, unpoised, maybe even hesitant when you're speaking. Or you know your business inside and out, and you think that's really a value, and it is, but you're not willing to take charge and when decisions need to be made. So there's sometimes unconscious behaviors that we're doing that are actually undermining our executive presence, and they're noticed by other leaders, but often overlooked by you because you don't realize, oh, I'm a little more quiet in most meetings I attend. That's just who I am. But what if you really realize how much that unconscious behavior, what you do, how much is that negatively impacting the perception others have of you? So these but behaviors that you might be doing, you want to become more aware of what am I doing that might be undermining others' perceptions of me, so that when they get to a talent review meeting, they're actually saying great things about me versus I really don't know that person. They don't speak up very much. I don't really know who they are.
You know, they're talking about you or they're not talking about you, and you don't want to have those butts get in the way. So the comment from Zachary here is priceless. His biggest butt is being an emotional worker, high energy, high spirited. I love that, by the way. So, and he feels that executives
Mm.
see this improperly at times. That's an interesting scenario, Joel. Have you run into that before, where someone's passion and enthusiasm runneth over and actually create that negative effect?
I mean, most of the time it's seen as positive, but I can see that I've seen this sometimes at the higher level environments with their more really senior leaders is there is a seriousness to them and a tone of seriousness. And I've had leaders who said, you know, I had to stop being as joking or as kind of in your way of high spirited. And so maybe at times you have to dial it back because of the environment you're in. It makes you come across maybe as not as serious. And so it's you're being discounted in that way, but there's a lot of other environments where you can utilize that part of you. I'm sure you're wonderful to work for and a great peer. But in these senior level meetings, you got to feel the room and understand what's the energy like and how do I make sure that I'm not such an outlier of that they feel like I'm not one of them. And so there is some contorting to some degree, but it's reading the room and recognize, oh, my high spirit, high energy doesn't fit here as effectively as it should. So there's some environments where I need to adjust it. And I've seen people do a really effective job at that. And that's important. You don't want to lose who you are, but at the same time, you don't want to stand out in such a way that they start to discount you. And even though you have tremendous credibility and respect in the organization, little things like this can actually cause them for you to lose a little bit of credibility.
Yeah, I do have to share. Earlier in my career, I was really confident and comfortable disagreeing with senior executives and had the good fortune to get involved in the mix quite a bit. And frankly, was pretty good at arguing. Now, the backstory is that in my family growing up, we argue for sport. It's what we do at the dinner table. It's just part of it. You know what? It was really good for a while until someone said, "Hey, Art, that's no longer cute. It's not effective. I needed to adapt my style." So didn't have to change my general nature to make a point or to disagree, but I had to read that room and learn to adapt my style there. Most
Someone said in the chat, situational leadership, and I think that's spot on. That you look at the situation you're in and you make sure you meet that moment.
Very nice. Great add-on, Greg. All right, so here's the one. First up in this one, gets a book. All you have to do is send me your shipping address in the continental US. Have you ever been told that you need to strengthen or develop your EP and wondered what that meant? Yeah, we're getting some quick yeses here. Anyone capable of amplifying that a little bit? So Victoria does. I tend to listen and take it all in, which may be construed as not confident. Yeah, Victoria, I have a lot of clients who are what I call processors. Joel will talk about that in the 3x3 coming up. Yeah, that can be misconstrued for sure.
Yeah,
Love that. Others out there. This is truth serum time.
not speaking up enough.
Not speaking up enough, told to speak up fast. Oof, that feels stressful. Julie, Better connect with your peer leaders. Yeah. So sometimes those level up roles create these situations where we had EP, we felt comfortable and confident and all of that at one level, and now we're at a new level, and it's a different game. Holding back, I'm just scrolling back up here. So Kathy, you were first up and happy to provide that book. Some great comments here, great observations. So, all right. So this elephant's still hanging out in the room, Joel. Again, love him.
What is it? What is it? I want to know what it is.
What the heck is EP? All right. Help us figure that out once and for all. And let me know when you want me to shift to your 3x3 here.
Yeah. So before we jump into the 3x3, I just want to say you're not alone in not knowing what executive presence is. I did a survey with over 150 leaders. They came back with 75 different attributes. So not knowing what it is very common. And the other challenge you have with that, I'd say 90% of the people I coach on executive presence, they come to me and they say, I need to work on this. And I say, well, what feedback did you get? And they go, well, they were kind of vague and they were unclear and they didn't really know how to describe it. And then the manager says to them, but I'll know it when I see it. and you're like, you'll know when you see it. I still don't know what it is. And so that can be really difficult to be in a situation when you don't know what it is. And so I want you to walk out of here today knowing exactly what it is. For the rest of your career, you'll never have a doubt on executive presence. So let's jump into the 3x3 model. Let me lay it out for you. And just know that this model comes from, I've worked with over 1,400 executive coaching clients and over 7,500 workshop participants to get clarity on this model. It took over 15 years to really hone in. And so there's the 3x3 executive presence model. There's 9 different competencies. I'm just going to lay it out for you. So you got gravitas, authority, and expression. I'm going to go over each one briefly. Under gravitas, you have 3 components. You got 3 competencies: confidence, commanding, and charismatic. And you can look, by the way, as we go over all 9 of these, just think off the top of your head, like, which one do you think your strengths are? Which one do you feel like are areas for improvement? And the thing about gravitas, a great example of this is, how many of you have been in a room, an environment where you're in a meeting and you speak up and share something and no one really says anything to it. And then 5 or 10 minutes later, another person speaks up, says the exact same thing. And you're like, and they get all the credit for the idea. And you're sitting there going, why didn't anyone think of me? And so this happens. And when you think about that situation, why is someone else getting credit for my idea? Because they heard their idea, but they didn't hear it when I said it. Because a lot of times you might be lacking gravitas because people don't hear you. Maybe you're a little too quiet. You lacked agency or power. You weren't resonating as much with your group. So when you speak, people need to feel your presence, your voice, your strength, your clarity. Have weight and gravitas and a command to what you're saying when you say it. And so confidence under gravitas, it's all about believing in who you are, what you do. Leverage your confidence to speak up at meetings, share your opinions, have the assertiveness to come forward. Commanding, this is all about being proactive, driving towards, action. It's about being assertive. Ultimately, I say the root of commanding is taking charge. When a situation asks for it, you're the one who's going to be willing to take charge. The opposite of commanding is you show up as more passive. You lack strength. You're not the one who to be in charge. Other people are, and you notice it and see it. So you got to work that one if that's something for you. And the last one's charismatic. Now, charisma is one people say, oh, I don't have that. They have that. That person in marketing or sales or that C-level executive. It's not just big personality. You break charisma down, it really comes down to energy, enthusiasm, excitement, passion, inspiration, invigorating people around you. So it's important to recognize, okay, how can I bring energy and enthusiasm? How can I elevate that for me? If I do that, I'm bringing more charisma. Now let's look at under it. So that's gravitas. Under the middle column, we got authority. That means people project onto you that you can be an authority because you know how to be decisive, bold, and influential. And so it's not just, it's a growing reputation that you have a growing reputation for making things happen. Because when you make things happen, you proactively show that you can be a decisive leader, a bold leader, and an influential leader. And so let's look at all 3 of these. Decisive. So this is, you know how to make up your mind quickly. You arrive at decisions with certainty. So go watch out for the tendency to be indecisive, because if you're indecisive, it erodes confidence in you. Leaders are hesitant to work with you or struggle when you struggle to make timely decisions. And so it's all about really coming from a place of, okay, do I have 70% of the information I need? Great. I can be decisive from that place. Don't wait to get to 90, 95, 98%. Boldness. This is really about making bold decisions, putting a stake in the ground and owning your position. You stand by your beliefs. You're willing to challenge others. You freely express your ideas. You're even willing to push back, but you bring boldness. Maybe boldness for you is I'm going to speak up at meetings when normally I'm quiet. So whatever it looks like, how can I be bold? Because we need leaders inside companies who can be innovative and be creative, and boldness is around that. Then the last one under authority is influential. This is about being persuasive. You want to sway others towards your point of view, towards change, create compelling arguments. It's about creating, an opportunity to drive engagement, drive participation. So it's influencing. What am I doing as a leader to influence inside my organization? When you're doing all three of these, you come across as someone who has more authority. The last column is expression. This is about you. Someone mentioned before about speaking up, about being vocal, putting yourself out there, make sure people know who you are. And when you're vocal, make sure you're insightful, you're sharing good ideas and recommendations. And the last one is make sure you're clear, you're concise, you're to the point. So the clarity one's so important, because let's say you're really insightful, you have a certain degree of a subject matter expertise that's made your career really successful. Well, a lot of times when people have a deep level of expertise, what ends up happening is they sometimes aren't as clear because they get way too much into the weeds, into the details. They lose clarity. They provide way too much information. They ramble on and on. They make it confusing for people. And then all of a sudden they lose credibility and they lose, people project onto them. They lack executive presence. Another point, but just going back up to the top of the expression about vocal, is you got to make sure you speak up, and you got to make sure people know what you're saying and who you are. I did a 360 feedback report once where this senior executive got feedback from other of their peers, and then one of their boss's boss said to me about this leader. They said, "We need this person, this leader, to voice his opinions. This is how he adds value. He's here for a reason, and it doesn't do the company any good when he's quiet. You don't do the company any good when you're quiet. You want to come to every meeting." One statement I want you to tell yourself: every meeting you come to, I want you to ask yourself, what can I contribute? So that every meeting you go to, you're contributing. So it's really important. So that's expression. That's a summary of all 9 competencies. Do realize that as you work on one competency, you might be improving another. You work on confidence, it could help your boldness. You work on decisiveness, you can come across as more commanding. You become more vocal and outspoken, people are going to perceive you with more confidence. So it's important to recognize how these all support each other. I'm going to pause here. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. We have a couple of comments and a question from the audience there. And just as an observation, first of all, that was a really fast run through of something that I know you've spent, thousands of hours developing. And even in yesterday's session with a small cohort group in my senior manager program, we spent a lot of time breaking these down and trying to understand them. And after you left, we spent more time breaking them down. And a couple of people struggled with, how can I be all of this? How can I do all of these? It seems like a lot.
So here's the thing. There is a lot here. Yeah. Realize that as you work, one of the 3 under gravitas, you're elevating your gravitas. You work on one of the 3 in there for a couple of weeks, I guarantee your gravitas goes from like 65 to maybe 75. It will jump. So I make it simple. You have 3 different columns. Pick 1 per column. Okay, I only have to do 3. Great. Or pick 1 per week and do it for 9 weeks. So whatever you put energy and attention on, you're going to grow that competency. So you can look at the 9 and say, which ones do I want to work on? It can feel overwhelming, but if you break it down into categories, I got 3 different categories, 3 different domains I'm working on. What am I doing to improve my expression? What am I doing to express and show up more with my presence? That's expression. What am I doing with gravitas? How am I showing up with more weight, more confidence? That's kind of the core component of it. And then authority. Are people seeing me as like I'm someone who can really be decisive? I get things. People know that I'm not indecisive. I'm not hesitant. I'm not wishy-washy. So it's just taking one per column could be a kind of more simple way to work on this.
Yeah, so I guess since we're in an elephant theme, we eat the elephant one bite at a time with apologies to elephants everywhere. Um, the vocal topic generated a fair amount of enthusiasm in the session, and it was around the notion similar to what you indicated on that 360. Sometimes people they need to think through things. They're processors. We've had a couple of people indicate that in here.
Yes.
And they'll get feedback at some point. Hey, you haven't participated. You're not participating in the meetings. They need help with that. What's some of your guidance for that?
Yeah, one of the most, this is so good. I'm so glad you brought this up because I do see this a lot. So many leaders I coach have the same thing that you just described, the challenge of. So what you want to do, it's kind of like you take a well of water and you have a pump and you're priming the pump to get the water higher, 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 higher until right at the top, the water is ready to be released. And so you want to pump yourself because you're more analytical and processor. That means you got to get a hold of some thoughts and ideas ahead of time so that these thoughts and ideas are on the surface. So when it comes to the discussion, they're ready to be delivered versus you're in the meeting, you're thinking, what should I say? How should I say it? And you're overthinking, you're analyzing, and it doesn't come out as easy. Some people who are extroverts to some degree often speak out loud. Introverts and more analytical people are more kind of thinking internally. So my recommendation is spend 2 to 3 minutes before every meeting you attend and say, what's the agenda? What's 1 or 2 points I can talk about in this meeting? And then take those 1 or 2 points, bring that to the meeting. Now you have 2 thoughts, 2 ideas. That's a very high probability that at some point there's going to be opportunity for you to share them. You now have them in the top of your mind. You pumped your well, got the water to the top. It's all ready to be released. And so these ideas now are able to be more released because they're on the top of the surface and you're now ready to deliver them. Or in a meeting, you get an idea or a thought. You're not sure how to say it. Write it down on a piece of paper just so you can see it clearly. Then speak it out loud after it, and you're ready to say it. So it's getting yourself more primed and ready for the opportunity to speak. So when it's being asked of you, you have some thoughts and ideas ready to be delivered.
Yeah, I mean, and back to that point, if people aren't hearing from you, especially those that decide what gets done and who does what, they don't have context for you. And I think you had 3 statements, if memory serves, on this topic, which is, do people know who you are? And I'll let you
Yeah,
finish next too.
let me speak to that. So
Yeah.
there's 3 things. It's a really important thing when you think about visibility. You think about being known in the organization. It's important to be visible and known and make sure your presence is being felt. How do I do a better job at that? Well, one exercise to do is take the most influential people in your organization. Let's say the top 10 or 15 most influential people in your company. Jot down all their names. Next to their names, ask yourself 3 questions. Number 1, do they know who I am? Okay. 95%, 90%, they know who I am. Let's just, depending on the size of your company, of course, but let's just say typically that's what I see. The second question, do they know what I do? Oh, okay. Now all of a sudden it goes down to maybe 50, 60%. They kind of know what I do. And then the third one, this is the most important one. Do they know the value I bring to the organization? Your own manager may not know the value you bring. Does your boss's boss do all of these? Most likely that's when the percentage gets down to like 5%. If I sat there and had a meeting room and I met with every influential person that knew you in the organization, I said, tell me for 10 minutes right now, what's the value art brings to the company? For 10 minutes, go ahead, tell me. Could your own manager do that? You could do that for yourself, I would hope. So it's like you want other people to see the same value you're experiencing in your work environment. So then it becomes a whole equation of what am I doing to make my presence more known? So the value is being known because when my value is known, then I'm going to get more opportunities and more promotions and more recognition and more rewards. So it's just that third part in your mind, keep thinking, am I communicating my value? Is my value being known to others?
This visibility exercise is priceless. I really encourage everybody to actually do that. Think through, jot down the influential people. Who do they know who I am? Do they know what I do? And number 3, the money question, most important, do they know the value I bring to the organization? The answer to number three is a low percentage there, then you have a lot of work to do. And I think that's a great way to kind of get it going. And it looks like Carissa, I hope I'm saying that properly. She appreciated that. Craig asked a question here. Sounds like you have to be a D or an I in DISC to have EP. What do you think about that, Joel?
Um, what's the DNI stand for? I don't know the DIS that well to be able to talk to it.
All right.
Um,
It makes two of us. So, Craig,
okay.
can you help us there? Sounds like you're a resident. Anybody else who's a resident DISC expert?
Yes.
Let's see what
I could assume, let's say it's saying that you need to be more extrovert.
Yeah, so the ENTJ and Myers-Briggs or something like that, right?
Exactly. I will say this, that dominant and influence. Yeah. This model has a little more, I don't like the word dominance, but it has some of that, like the commanding piece. But what I say is a lot of leaders I coach in this model, in some way, was created for, are more on the introverted side, had more humility, are more deferential. And so these competencies are like, oh, I need to build on these and develop these. And I can see the value of having more of this while also being authentically to myself, being authentic. I will make one comment that I haven't stated yet, and that is, what do you do if you do these competencies too much, to an extreme? Because some of you are listening to this and saying, I'm too vocal, I speak up too much, or I'm too commanding and confident. And sometimes people think I'm too arrogant, or I have too much high charisma, which someone talked about earlier, too passionate with extreme enthusiasm, and so much enthusiasm, you dominate the room. Or you're way too decisive and you can become dismissive of others and lack collaboration, or you're too vocal and you dominate meetings, as I said earlier, and you don't get a word in edgewise. So some of this you have to recognize, it's a dial. How do I turn this dial up or turn this dial down, depending on the circumstances, depending on the meetings, depending on the people I'm interacting with? And so for yourself, you have to recognize there's a sweet spot here you're trying to find. For many people, they want to develop a lot of these competencies, and for some, you have to dial it down. So it's an important way to look at this model.
So, Joel, in the group session yesterday, the commanding one created a fair amount of dialogue after you had left us. And one individual, just an amazing kind of mid-career leader who really does want to contribute more, she admitted she struggles with that one. She doesn't know how to be that person, feels like it's inauthentic, doesn't feel like that's the individual that's going to stand on the table or pound on the table or leap up in front of the group of executives and seize the whiteboard and solve the problem. Is there a way to reframe or be commanding without having to be that, traditional, almost cliche type, hey, I'm in charge?
Yeah, it's a great distinction. I think that it can easily be looked at that way. And I think another way to kind of reframe it is, are there opportunities that are being presented where I could volunteer more, where I could take ownership of a project, or I could co-lead a project? Because commanding, there isn't, the core of commanding to me is taking charge, but it doesn't mean you have to be the one who like always is trying to be the most dominant in the room, or I'm going to always lead, or here, let me go to the whiteboard. It could be, let's say you don't speak up as much in the meeting, but afterwards you send an email out to the entire group who participated in the meeting and you summarize everything. And so there's ways in which, how do I take action to show that I'm engaged, that I'm a full participant? And that's why I say, like, you volunteer for projects, or you're willing to co-lead on a project, or you have an idea and you want to go in a direction that could be transformative for your group or your company. And commanding could be, I'm going to drive that and lead it. So look for ways where you can be a leader, where you could be the one who leads ideas, leads new concepts, lead things, or co-lead on things, because that's what people are looking for in their leaders. The higher up you go, the more they want that. Yes, followers are important and valuable, but if you're really looking at executive presence, if you're too much of a follower and you're too much behind the scenes, then you're too much not known and your presence isn't felt.
So there's a comment in here too. The individual says, I think my charisma is very high, but that makes my clarity a bit lower. Something
because so what often happens is your charisma is so high that you say a lot. You have a lot of communication, you have a lot of ideas, a lot of concepts, and you want to get it all out there. And that charisma most people who are really charismatic, they have a lot to say. They're really communicative. And so then you have to watch out for the clarity piece, because you might say so much information that you overwhelm your audience. It's like, what's the point you're really trying to make? So sometimes that charisma, you want to use it more judiciously in ways in which it's like, okay, let me take my charisma. How do I say what I want to say in 7 minutes, in 2 minutes, and make my points really clear and to the point? Versus if I go rambling on and on and on, I kind of lose my audience. So I love what you're saying. That's good self-awareness. So then how do I help my clarity? So then it's maybe being a little more intentional, not just speaking off the cuff, but being more intentional about what I'm saying and how I'm saying it. Bring the charisma, but have it be a little tighter and contained.
Greg offers a great comment here. Leaders also have to find ways to bring others along in the journey of EP. So not only is this something we use with ourselves, but it's something we have to begin working with our team members on. I mean, we have to help teach them, help clarify, eliminate that elephant in the room on what EP is, and have them begin to work in these different areas. So love
Exactly.
that point, Greg. Thank you. All right. So we've talked about what are the factors that build to it. Let's look at the factors that detract from executive presence. And Joel, this was from your research here, so I'll let you amplify it.
Yeah, so I did a survey with 1,400 leaders, and I really was asking them, what are the behaviors that people do that actually undermine executive presence? What are those? And what came back was, top three, all in the 80 percentile. Number one was indecisive, actually. And some people are surprised by that. But like the more indecisive you come across, the more people think, I don't know if I can trust that person. I don't have confidence in them. The second one is being a little more timid. And the third one was lacking confidence. Those were the top three. And if I go over them and you just think about this for yourself as we go over these, which ones do you do? Because certain situations you're in, certain meetings you attend, certain projects you're on, how do you sometimes show these behaviors? Because if you are, it can undermine how people are perceiving you. So indecisive, tentative, unsure, uncertain. This is someone who's more wishy-washy, waver on decisions. And sometimes that's a personality type. You know what? I've always been indecisive my whole life. Well, you got to work on that in the corporate environment, because if you're too indecisive, people are going to say, I don't really trust that person's ability to do something because they're so indecisive, things don't get done. Or the timid one, you're more hesitant, unsure, you hold yourself back, afraid, complacent. What do you need to do to prepare yourself so that you don't come across as timid? Lacking confidence. You doubt yourself, you're hesitant, unassuming, sometimes even meek. How do you lean into your confidence? And sometimes you start exceeding very well in your job and you start gaining confidence. You're on top of the world. You're like, I know what I'm doing. I know my job well. And then guess what happens? You get promoted. Yes, but no. But yes, the no part is you get promoted. And then the confidence you had that was so high drops to a lower degree, because now you're in an environment that is a little more foreign to you. You're not as comfortable in. You're working with more senior level leaders. You're having to run projects and have a responsibility of 50 people instead of 20. And that can impact our confidence. The next one's too verbose. You ramble on, you're not concise, you can seem unfocused, unclear. So a lot of times the people who are too verbose, they don't know it's a negative, because they just keep doing it. They show up at all these meetings. You're like, why don't they know they're doing this? And so it can really undermine people's perception of you if you are too verbose. So you got to really watch out for that. The next one's too quiet. So it's the opposite end of the spectrum. You're more soft spoken. You don't speak up as much, maybe more withdrawn. This is a challenge for a lot of people. A lot of people I work with are on the more quiet side. And so we work on is how they can show up more and have their presence be more felt. And yes, it's a little more out of their comfort zone, but at times they need more of that because they want to be leveraged in the organization for the good work they're doing. And they also want to have more impact and more influence. And at certain stages in their career, they're going to have to show up more. It's a necessity. You can't hide out anymore. You actually have to have more of a presence. The last few are unorganized. You're just unprepared, cluttered, chaotic. Someone earlier when we were doing in the chat mentioned this one. And then laid back and unimaginative. Unimaginative, you're uncreative, kind of dull, not really inspiring. Laid back, this is a personality type. I've seen this at times where someone's just laid back, casual. They're great when there's a crisis because they stay calm. But they also, you were too laid back that people sometimes question, can this person really drive this? Do they have the ability and the strength needed and some of the power needed to drive this? And so sometimes leaders need to work on that laid back style. So think about it for yourself. Which one of these do you feel like are ones that you do that you need to work on? Because if you work on it, it's going to make a big difference. And I'll say this, if you're too verbose, you have a tendency to over explain. I'll give you one for an example. You provide too many details in meetings. You make it hard for others to kind of follow your key points. What's the negative impact of that? Well, let's think about it. People tune you out. Decisions take longer and your recommendations lose impact. So then if you were going to work on this and improve it, what effect would it have if you improve this? Well, my meetings will be more efficient. My ideas will be clear and I'd come across as more confident and credible. So then what action step am I going to take to improve this? Well, before I speak, I'm going to summarize my key point in one sentence, and then I'll expand if people have some questions they want me to expand on. So less is more. I'm going to give them less, and then they're going to tell me where they want me to go with the other information I have.
So Joel, I've got a confession to make to you and
Yeah.
to the group. In my life as a senior executive in software companies, there were more than a couple of these amazing individuals, happened to be in our software development area, that were extremely verbose. And I would see them coming and I would try to find a way to make sure that I was otherwise engaged, occupied, on my way somewhere, or doing something. And I'm sorry, folks, I'm human, but it was that mental exhaustion that it took to engage with someone who was what I describe as a watchmaker. And if you've heard that phrase before, are you a watchmaker or a time teller? You ask somebody what time it is, and some people will tell you the time, and others will tell you how to build the watch. So, it's those individuals that can really be challenging. I had to redouble my efforts to concentrate, to learn to engage, to ask questions, to draw out their core point. Otherwise, it was just a wild adventure, a digression from one point to another to another. So, all right, now that confession is out of the way there.
And Art, I appreciate you saying that because I think I think it's one of the most impactful, negatively impactful on a
Mhm.
leader's executive presence is the tendency to go into way too much detail. And most people who do it don't know they do it, or they don't know they do it, or they know they do it and they don't know how to stop it. And
So,
so it's, yeah, go ahead.
yeah, I was just going to say to your point of, you ask people, hey, which one of these might be derailing you? Oftentimes we don't know, and we've got to get that feedback, right? We
Yes,
really do.
yes. It's
Let's
a
comment
blind
on
spot that needs to be revealed.
exactly on this list. I am surprised as well by indecisive, and I love teaching. I think decision-making skills are critical. I'm just surprised that that came out at 88% in the number run. I would have guessed timid, lacking confidence, and verbose as kind of a one, two, three, at least in some order in there. So really fascinating outcome. Any reason, any thoughts on why that one ranks so high at the top?
Um, I think because at some point in their observing you and your work environment is ultimately, if you really, really are indecisive, think about what kind of bottleneck happens because your ideas and your clarity and the projects you're working on, how they start to get stuck. And
Mhm.
so when you're indecisive, projects start to get stuck. People don't really, your team may not trust you as much. And so then you start losing credibility. And so let's say you're in a meeting and you're being indecisive, other people can project onto you like that person seems like they don't know what they're doing or they're, but it's just you're indecisive. You're conflicted about which decision to make. I think it's just a dominant one because it can come across that you don't know what you're doing because you're like in between two worlds and you're not willing to commit. And at some point, if you look at a lot of very, very high level successful leaders, look at your companies. A lot of them are pretty good at being decisive. They make decisions and they move on. They make decisions, they move on, and they don't need 100% information or
Right.
100% confidence in their decisions before they make them. And so it's moving quickly with the decisions you're making. And it seems to me to be a pretty strong, important, valuable leadership trait.
Look, and the higher you rise in the ranks, the less the data-backed decisions exist out there, right? There's
Yeah.
a degree of ambiguity that's just critical. So Kathy asks, hey, I found the tendency to go into too much detail, multiple digressions, to be common with those with ADHD, a bit of the nature of the brain. Any suggestions or tactics to address?
I mean, I think the key thing is preparation. Like your brain naturally is going to go to detail. So then you have to prep your brain to go into to specifics. And so what you want to do every time you speak, if you can, put on a piece of paper what your point is. What's the point you're really trying to make? So write that down first in a meeting before you even speak. And then if you are speaking, practice it and realize, because it takes a lot more effort for someone to contain the information than it is to expand on the information. So it's all about preparation. So you're giving a presentation, try to pass it with a peer of mine. Say, hey, can I practice this with you? Am I being concise and to the point? Here's how I want to come across. Even in a meeting, you could pull a colleague aside and say, hey, in this next meeting, I'm going to speak up 2 or 3 times. Tell me how I sound. Was I able to be concise and to the point? Mm-hmm. But realize if you're just left to your natural tendencies, you will give too much detail. And if you're stressed, you're going to give too much detail. So a lot of it is prepping yourself and realize I got to prep myself in order to practice containment.
Yeah, Joel, that's great. And one of the things that I work with a lot of folks on is a concept called message mapping, which is very different than what I'm doing here on screen. That's mind mapping. If anybody wants kind of the instructions, guidance, pointer to the articles I've written on message mapping, just drop me a note, and I'll be happy to send those materials along. All right, so Joel, we've got 2 fabulous visuals. Everybody will get the mind map out of this. A book, which I read the book before I met Joel, and I reached out to him because of the book. Literally takes you through. I think you have 12 chapters in there, Joel, and 9 of the chapters are dedicated to breaking down each one of the components of this 3x3 matrix. There,
I will say is one of the things people most tell me after reading the book is they say, I got to be honest with you, Joel. I got the book and I was having issues with one of the competencies. And so I went right to the chapter. I didn't start from the beginning. I'm sorry. and they went right to the chapter that's most relevant because those entire chapters are dedicated to each of the 9 competencies. So whichever competency you're struggling with, you go right to that chapter and you get it as a resource. And so what people have said to me, they go, months after I got it, like 3 or 4 months later or a year later, I was in a new situation, a new environment, a new project. And I realized, oh my God, my boldness needs to be stronger. Oh, let me go to boldness. It wasn't an issue last year, but it is right now. They go to that chapter, they start working on their boldness, boom, they improve that area. So it becomes like a resource you go back to based on your circumstances in your work environment and how things change and which competency do I need to focus on.
So maybe not a vacation page turner or a beach read necessarily, Joel, but an outstanding resource when we're working on something specific. Is that a fair characterization?
Yeah, it is. It is.
Although you'd like it to be that beach read, right?
Yeah, I would kind of, but
hope springs eternal. All right, so we've got these resources, and again, big fan of the book. I think it's amazingly helpful for just what Joel described. What can we do? We want to go back now. The group here wants to go back and kind of tune in to where they're at with EP and what the strengths might be and what the gaps might be. What's your counsel here, Joel?
Is looking at this and recognizing for yourself, okay, I'm going to take one thing and then what can I do this week to start to make changes in the behavior? I find as a coach and what I do with leaders is I don't want this just to be an opportunity for you to learn today. I want you to take the learning and actually apply it. So I want you to today, tomorrow, do something based on the 9 competencies, do something based on what we spoke about today. What's one action I could take where I make a decision when I only have 70% of information, or I prepare a little extra for this upcoming meeting so I can come across as more confident, where my executive presence can be stronger. Take something here. Or if I'm not vocal enough, I'm going to go to every meeting this week and I'm going to speak up twice no matter what. Mm-hmm. Make a commitment so that some change can occur and you can elevate your presence and feel what it feels like to do that and see what kind of change response you might get from others when you start showing up with a presence that people can feel and actually have impact in your organization, and they can feel your presence and they can feel your impact, and then your values known, and now you're off and running and you're going, great, bring it on. Here I go. I'm starting to have the impact I want. I'm starting to get the promotions I want. And the company starts leveraging you more, and that's a win-win for both.
There's a second element to that, right? So self-assess, what can I do? Take action. And by the way, Joel, I think the outcome of taking those actions that you described will be a growth in self-confidence. I think people will naturally get that. How about talking with the manager? What do you think about that?
I think it's a great idea. I would say if you want to bring this back to your work environment, my suggestion is go talk to 3 or 4 people. Email them today. That's my commitment I want you to make. I want you to email 3 or 4 people today and say, hey, I just took this hour webinar, this class, and they talked about executive presence, and the person who's leading it, his name's Joel. He said we had to make one commitment. We had to talk to 3 or 4 people and ask them, get feedback, and say, hey, how do you think my executive presence is? How is my executive presence? And so what I recommend doing is having that feedback conversation. Pull out the 3x3 model, share it with them, and I'll put this in chat right here. Here are, let me just send it to you. Did this work? Where is it? Sorry, I'm trying to.
This guidance is worth about 5 times the price of admission here.
I'm trying to, let's see, I'm trying to put the 5 in, but it's not sending. Why is it not sending?
If you're able to copy and paste, otherwise you can share it with me and I'll send it out in the following notes, or I'll try to capture. I think there's questions, right?
Yeah.
All right. I will do my best to capture them here.
Okay. So anyway, and so here are the 5 questions. You could go print the 3x3 model, bring it to a bunch of different people, say, here's the model, here's my executive presence. Looking at the 9, tell me what my strengths are, tell me what I can improve upon. The 5 questions are, am I perceived as having EP?
Am I perceived? Okay.
In what ways do I show that I have an EP?
Got it.
And what do I do to undermine my EP?
Could use that list there as well, couldn't they?
Yes, they could. How can I improve my EP is number 4. And number 5 is I find the great question is, what would you be willing to do to help me improve my EP?
Love that one.
And that one's great because it really puts you in a position where you have an opportunity for them to give you feedback. And so I'm saying today, email 3 or 4 people, say, I want to get feedback from you, because there's not one person in this room who's gotten feedback on their executive presence. They got feedback on their performance. They get feedback during performance reviews, but specifically executive presence related to these 9 competencies. See where that conversation takes you. Bring it to 3 or 4 people. You might be surprised by some of the things that people most appreciate about the impact and value you bring that you didn't even know related to executive presence.
Yeah, no doubt. Somebody's asking where we send the mind map out. Absolutely, Joel. Those are great questions. I see we're bumping up against the hard stop. You have one. The group does as well. So I can't thank you enough for this. Any parting thoughts or just kind of guidance, inspiration for the group as they go back into the workplace and look at working on their EP?
I would say the bottom line is this. What I most want for you is that I want your presence to be felt in the organization. I don't want you to be a hidden leader. I don't want you to be overlooked or underutilized. I want your presence to be felt. For your presence to be felt, you got to work on some of these 9 competencies. Do they put you out of your comfort zone at times? Absolutely. Are they sometimes fearful and scary to do? Absolutely. Take some steps to move some of these forward so you elevate your executive presence. Every leader I coach and work with, every time they improve their executive presence and have the courage to do it, it comes back to them in ways in which they do get the recognition, the appreciation, the acknowledgement, the success, the promotions, and the visibility. So it's there for you, but it does take courage. It's not easy to do. It takes a lot of strength to put yourself out there and show more of your presence and make sure that your power, your strength, that you're stepping into your power, you're leading with conviction, and people can feel that.
Joel, what a great way to cap things off. You are a rock star. Thank you so much for spending your time, sharing your wisdom, sharing your research, giving us the guidance here. Appreciate you, and we'll see you very soon. Thanks, Joel.
Thanks, Art.
And to everyone else out there, so fantastic comments, observations. Hey, Patrick, I saw that you had a question in there. I'll actually loop back with you on the answer to that question, and we'll take it for there. Look for our next announcement on the April Jam session. We are shifting to Thursdays at noon Central, so you'll see a lot of information from me. Really appreciate each and every one of you. Take care. Have a great weekend.